Hello, and thank you for tuning in to our militarism series. My name is Jarvis Benson, and I am on the policy team at the Cairo Center. I have a background in international studies, and I'm currently a PhD student in sociology at UNC Chapel Hill. During the series, we will sit down with various organizers and scholars and talk with them about the violent manifestations of U.S. militarism and where we can go from here. Today, we will talk to TJ Thompson. TJ is a veteran of the U.S. Navy enlisted from 1998 to 2004. He was stationed on board USS Portland, LSD 37 from 2000 to 2003, and deployed to Europe and the Mediterranean Sea, South America, and in support of the global war on terror to the Persian Gulf in early 2003. Thompson was raised in Chesapeake, Virginia, where he currently resides with his family and is a community and national organizer volunteering as an advocate with groups including the Poor People's Campaign, About Face, Veterans Against the War, Veterans for Peace, and Drug Policy Alliance. He has worked directly with U.S. House and Senate on marijuana policy reform for veterans and currently engages on ongoing work locally with Hampton Road's Poor People's Campaign. TJ is in the process of a master's degree in the Humanities at the Old Dominion University with an emphasis in critical cultural analysis. TJ speaks to veteran organizing, and he has been a part of linking militarism and mental health concerns among veteran groups. He also is an advocate for drug policy reform and makes connections between current U.S. drug policy and militarized policing.
If you want to get started, we can start with the first question then, which is how'd you get involved in the veterans movement and in this type of militarization work?
So around the fall of 2009, I met an organizer with Veterans for Peace, Tom Palumbo. He passed away last year from cancer. But 2009, I met him as I was wrapping up culinary school, which I attended on my GI Bill. And I was working at a farmer's market, and he had a little organizing space right next door. And so he started talking to me. And then, like I said, about the fall 2009, he invited the Iraq Veterans Against the War field organizing team to come to town, kind of hang out with me and introduce me to him, because he'd been working on me for, I don't know, about 6 months or so, easing me into this idea of the veterans peace movement. So yeah, when I met the IVAW field organizing team, I started kind of revisiting these ideas. That was '09, so I've been out for about 5 years. I got out in 2004 of the Navy. I enlisted in 1998, uh, and um, and one of the reasons I really got involved was because my issue at first with the military was the fact that I was put into a situation that was traumatic for me as I was trying to escape, my childhood trauma and upbringing. And when I requested mental health assistance, I was basically ostracized by my chain of command. And then to the point of, I was seeing a psychiatrist, a military commissioned psychiatrist, who actually recommended me for a discharge due to he called it an inability to adapt to a military lifestyle. And I kind of chuckle at that now, because I feel everybody should be diagnosed with an inability to adapt to a military lifestyle. But I was put on these antidepressants, and I think one was like an anti-seizure medication, gabapentin, and Zoloft, and I was kept in an active status, like I was deployable. I was on a ship, active on these drugs, and in a suicidal state. And it actually culminated with my first suicide attempt in 2001. That's why it's right around September 11th is what happened, somewhere near there. I don't remember the exact date, but yeah, so I first got involved in this movement to be because I really wasn't fully radicalized yet. Uh, but I got involved in the Veterans Peace movement to like say, look, no, you don't have to make this choice. Like, it might be rough, it might be hard on you. However, you can step away from this. You don't have to go through what I went through, which I was told to suck it up, to man up. And so I finished my enlistment and was discharged, and then started addressing stuff once I met people like Tom Palumbo and folks from Iraq Veterans Against the War, who's now About Face Veterans Against the War. So yeah, that was how I initially came into the fold, and then it just kind of evolved from there as I met people and they started challenging kind of my just those systemic views that I had held on to, because I was very libertarian minded still, because I was still coming out of that military mentality. And and then as people started challenging me and I started becoming more and more educated and more removed from my right-wing evangelical upbringing, then I started realizing, oh no, what I was taught is complete opposite and exactly wrong as to what we need to be doing. It is not a pick yourself up by the bootstraps kind of world. It is find the people that are most impacted, most affected by whatever's causing these societal ills, if you will, and work with those people, empowering them, with a sense of sincerity, not just because it's going to get you into heaven or whatever. And so moving into the poor people's campaign, it was kind of when in 2018, it's interesting we're having this conversation because we're right around the anniversary when I first got involved with Poor People's Campaign, which was the protest outside of McConnell's office for Memorial Day during the rollout of the 40 days of action. And so that's the end of this month, Memorial Day. And so but it was the fact that as I have this trauma related to militarism, as I have this trauma related to racism rooted in right-wing evangelicism, like I found space to heal within the Poor People's Campaign. And not because I'm a Christian, I'm openly not a Christian organizing. I do claim Buddhist because that's what I am. However, like, I have a lot of trauma around Christianity, and I don't. But Poor People's Campaign has helped me, and organizing with the Veterans Peace Movement, which brought me to the Poor People's Campaign, has kind of helped me make peace with that trauma and understand and meet, like, Christians, Muslims, Jewish people, other Buddhists, who actually believe in this religion that's liberatory. And so that's kind of where I am today, like where I came from and how I got to here.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And you're right. Like, I think the campaign is a really special, like, it's a really special organizing place, where we can, like, really um, encompass a lot of, like, experiences that are usually marginalized and are a lot of times, like, overlooked in different movements. And so I appreciate you naming that. Um, that's big. So I guess then the next question, I want to, like, pivot and go back to, like, your thoughts around, like, mental health and, like, the importance and, like, your, like, kind of experiences there, especially, like, over the past like year. Like, we've thought a lot about, like, how we can change how police departments and like, the police response to somebody in a mental health emergency. You talked a lot about like, alternative therapies and different ways that we can, like, heal. So I'm wondering, like, what's your response to how we, like, currently respond to, like, mental health crises? How can we do better from someone um, that has experiences analyzing and talking about these types of issues?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to give a trigger warning here because we're talking about mental health issues. And as someone who has survived my own multiple suicide attempts, like I talk bluntly about suicide when we discuss mental health, as well as, other experiences with other people who deal with other mental health issues. So I just want to make sure that we cover that there's probably going to be some stuff that's just laid on the table here. So first and foremost is like, in my upbringing, we did not address mental health, period. Like that was just like, it was faux pas, taboo, whatever. Like it was the hushed whispers across the pews in church on Sunday mornings, like, oh, such and such went to the psychiatrist or whatever. And that's, and it comes from kind of this, it it comes from this kind of Protestant post Enlightenment Western European type of views, these puritanical type views that came over with colonization into the United States. And so these views on mental health like are really, really rooted. I'm gonna kind of digress a little bit here. Recently, the situation with the Army officer in Windsor, Virginia, which is right up the street from me. Like I literally drive through there multiple times a month. Normally, if I'm heading to like Richmond or out towards the mountains or whatever, like I'm driving through Windsor because it's just one of my favorite areas to drive, like that part of Virginia and all, going that way out west. But what a lot of people don't realize is that area is where the first police were enacted in this country, and under the first law, which was the Fugitive Runaway Slave Law, where police were enacted in colonial Virginia at the time, to catch people who were enslaved that escaped from the enslavement. And but Bacon's Rebellion was right there in that area. Like, I mean, that's probably the closest like known town area to where Bacon's Rebellion happened. So a lot of these issues are, what I'm getting at here is, a lot of these issues are deeply, deeply rooted in this country's original sin. And so therefore we first must address that. And if we go back to what starts all of this, it's all rooted in this type of violence that it's, in a sense, like we're almost removed enough from it now. Although, I personally can remember knowing people who either their like grandparents were enslaved or their great grandparents were enslaved, and hearing stories, but we're almost removed enough from it that it's almost unfathomable what these like inhumane atrocities that were committed really were. Like I remember I was up in the Philly Art Museum a few years back with the group Warrior Writers. We work on processing military experiences through creative writing. And I saw like there was a display, and it was a collar that was put around a child's neck, and it washed ashore like right around Philadelphia. And yeah, like I mean, my knees just got weak, and so it's when we address these types of atrocities, that's what we really need to bring to the forefront and have a large conversation, and just stop with the like kind of like he said, she said, they said, whatever type stuff, and really just say, no, this is what's going on. This is how we need to get back to our I feel statements, I think. And so getting back to the militarism rolling into policing and mental health. So what happens is with the military, okay, now we're standing down from Afghanistan and Iraq supposedly now. However, there's other hot spots in the area in the world that are heating up. So we don't know what's going to happen, say with Iran, Russia, China. There's a few others that we're really, a lot of us that watch policy are really watching right now. But what happens is, if they can't use all of the military equipment and maintain all of the contracts with the government contractors such as Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, etc., then they just bring all of that equipment home and give it to local police. And therefore, we go against poor and impoverished people overseas, and then we bring it back home to poor and impoverished people at home. The war on drugs is a prime example. So the war on drugs is, a lot of drug use comes out of kind of a feeling of desolation and not really being able to touch, put a finger on your feelings and emotions and what you're experiencing. And this creates this kind of class consciousness disconnect. In the prime example, 80s and 90s, the crack cocaine epidemic inside of Black America. It was a completely made up situation by Reagan and Bush, Quayle, and even rolling into the Clinton administration. So it's when we bring this militarization that we can't, like, the rest of the world becomes aware of it, so we bring it back home. We militarize the streets. Richard Nixon proclaimed the war on drugs public enemy number one, and from Nixon here on out, all the way up to Biden. That's one of Biden's skeletons in his closet, is his treatment of communities, Black, brown, people of color, indigenous people, communities, with this criminality type situation. And it goes back to, if you see it happening a lot in these arrest situations where guns are planted, drugs are planted, because and it might not even be found out till 10, 20 years later, when this corrupt police officer has been busted for something totally different, and then it comes out as they review all the other cases and they look at footage and find this stuff. And then and creating this class consciousness around all of this is recognizing the fact that just because in the mainstream media we hear that stuff like this happens more in Black communities or Latina, Latinx communities, recognizing the fact that it's not the color of someone's skin, it's most likely the zip code they live in, which also determines how much money they're going to make their entire life.
Yep, exactly. I mean, hitting every nail and hit every head. I think that you are exactly right. I think it's so just insidious that we have just like a clear, um, like a war against the poor that's continuing to happen. So, can you speak then, like a little bit more on like the drug policy reform?
Yeah, so kind of what got me into drug policy reform was about the time Colorado was starting to legalize around like 2011, 2012, and hanging out with folks from Iraq Veterans Against War, Veterans for Peace and such. I realized a lot of us were smoking cannabis more than like smoking cigarettes or consuming alcohol when we were getting together. And like even like people who didn't smoke cannabis could, like, they would be fine hanging around the toker circle, whereas a lot of people don't like to hang out with people drinking if they don't drink, or smoking tobacco products if they don't consume tobacco products. However, like I was just realizing that this was kind of one of these things that a lot of us were using to reduce our reliance upon things like tobacco or alcohol, as well as our reliance upon prescription drugs, be it pain pills, antidepressants, anti-anxiety pills. Then that's what I use it for. Is I actually came off after my second suicide attempt in 2011. I quit cold turkey off of benzodiazepines. Ativan is, I think, what the name brand of it, what I was getting from the VA, and also antidepressants. And I just quit cold turkey, which is not advised, using cannabis medicinally. And so I realized that we were using it as a veterans community, but not really talking about it openly. So I started talking amongst friends, and then started asking kind of the right questions to the right people. Wound up getting involved with Americans for Safe Access, which is at the time, 2013ish, they were the largest patient oriented advocacy group focusing on medical marijuana legalization federally and statewide. So yeah, I started working on that, and then just realizing, and that's kind of when I started connecting all the dots about, this war abroad, the war on drugs, the war on poverty. And I started looking at different pieces and aspects of my life and realizing, oh my, I was raised working poor. That trailer park that I was raised in, I was raised in this right-wing evangelicism that is what's the root of a lot of these problems. Like, and then realizing that, oh, the reason I went into the military is because that's what my culture told me to do. Oh, the reason I had problems in the military is because, like I said, everybody should be diagnosed with an inability to adapt to a military lifestyle. So I started putting all these pieces together as I was organizing and getting deeper and deeper into these different movements, and working with like I said, Americans for Safe Access, Drug Policy Alliance, uh, uh, and we just, and I was able to I was gaining a sense of agency back. And kind of also what I was doing in the process is, as I was getting access to these federal legislators on Capitol Hill, I would work in some of these more progressive talking points that I was picking up in the peace movement. So I'm sitting here, and for example, like when I was helping draft legislation, I would always make sure and question about, like, okay, well, a requirement for an identification to get a medical marijuana card. What about someone who's homeless, houseless, does not have a permanent address? Are they completely left out of the medical market? Or, how do we address this? And finding those pieces of common ground, really, and realizing that it all comes back to this idea of, the three isms that we discuss: materialism, militarism, and racism. So yeah, that's kind of how I realized, and then and they all just kind of play off of each other and keep us from, they give us these blinders preventing this class consciousness, this type of solidarity, and then moving forward to an international type of solidarity.
Yeah. Wow. I appreciate that, and I think that's like so real. The three isms you said were racism, militarism, and
Material.
what was materialism? No, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I guess then maybe my next question is, from your perspective, as someone with, you noted your upbringing and thinking about like how crucial you felt like the military was, and you joined the military yourself. Where do you think now, or what do you think now the role the U.S. military like should play? Like, what should the role of the military be? And then where should those funds be allocated in the budget? Like, where should those funds be going?
Like, first and foremost, I believe that there shouldn't be any military. When I decided to follow and commit to a non-violent lifestyle, it was actually after my when I signed that paper with my first action with the Poor People's Campaign, because I'd never had to like sign a commitment to nonviolence before, and I'd already been Buddhist for a few years at the time. And so I was like, well, let me try and live my life for the benefit of all living beings from this point on, and which means, not committing any acts of violence or whatever against any type of living being. So I first and foremost believe that, like, we should not have any forms of violence. We should abolish all forms of violence. And I believe that is the radical or root form of an abolitionist is I'm abolishing all forms of violence on this planet. So therefore, that's where I believe the military should stand. However, I also understand that that is that Thomas More utopia. That's where I was babbling about. I understand that's where that Thomas More utopian view is, and it, like I was saying, it is necessary. Now, where should these funds go? We'll go back to community policing and mental health, for instance. We talk. You For me as an abolitionist, I believe defund the police means exactly that: defund the police. We move this type of funding, whether it come from military spending, which it totally could, come from police spending, which I think policing is militarism. But however these funds come across, you then create community-based care type teams. One of the things I was thinking about earlier, when you brought up this policing and mental health type thing, is there's this especially among veteran communities, we refer to it as suicide by cop or suicide by 911. Basically, veteran having some sort of post-traumatic stress episode or some sort of panic attack, anxiety attack, however it's defined, and then law enforcement is called. Law enforcement does not have training for de-escalating these types of mental health crises. So therefore, the veteran knows this in their mind, and they know that if they act out enough, then they will be shot, and therefore they don't have to commit suicide themselves. However, it is a form of suicide because they know what's going to happen when law enforcement shows up. And we see very similar situations playing out a little bit differently among other traditionally marginalized and oppressed communities. I'll say, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and just to name a couple more recent ones that have happened, and then down in Elizabeth City, right down the street from me, Virginia Beach, right down the street from me recently too. Like I said, Windsor earlier as well. So we see this policing. So what we first need to do is create this community-based response team that can actually care. I remember I went to my therapist in a crisis mode. This was I want to say like early 2016, and my therapist sent me to in our area there, it's community services behavioral boards or something. And so I went to them. They're like, "Oh no, you need to be admitted right now to a mental health facility." So they sent me to this place, and I'm going to date myself here, but it made me think of when I was a teenager, young adult, and saw on MTV that Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. And I think they even told me that if my health insurance didn't cover it, it was going to be $2,000 a day. And I asked, well, first thing, what are you going to take all of my prescriptions away from me? And they're like, yes, we are addiction recovery facility. I'm like, I'm not an addict. And so I was completely turned off. And so I had to find my own treatment that would suit me. Luckily, through my connections, I was able to get into this pilot program at Rush University in Chicago, the Road Home program, and I worked in a 3-week intensive outpatient program there. But that's the thing. Like, why did I have to rely upon charity as a disabled veteran who, first and foremost, there's supposed to be care guaranteed to me by the VA through Congress, through laws. However, I wasn't able to receive proper and adequate care through that system. So yeah, we need to start looking at creative ways of bringing this money and showing people that the military is not the route out of poverty. Like how like I don't understand how we can't just present it as the fact that you can't just go and, you know, volunteer to potentially kill somebody thousands of miles away just so you can make it into the middle class. Like, that's kind of one of the things that's really befuddled me over these years. So yeah, so we need to funnel this money, and you know, the money can go into, and looking at the Souls of Poor Folk audit with the campaign, you know, you see a lot of the examples of how many teachers jobs this type of funding can create if we just take a little sliver off of military funding, how many, you know, scholarships for colleges can create, how many, you know, vocational education jobs it could create. So the possibilities are endless. So we need to look at you know, creating a better educational system. We need to create a better infrastructure system in this country. We need to create a better health system in this country. So there are a lot of places that this money can be shifted to, and I believe that the Souls of Poor Folk audit is a very good tool to really look at these numbers and these statistics.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And also, it's just to go back to your point about, you know, how hard it took you to get like support, you know, and you mentioned it, but think about like, you know, like a normal person, like how hard it is to get that type of support. And you're supposed to have that support, like you mentioned, you know, through the VA, but like that clearly is not there. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you are so right. So then, TJ, let's talk about this next question then, which is around, you know, the huge shift in public conversations that we've had recently around, you know, building movements around demilitarization, abolition. You know, we're thinking about like true safety and what that means and how we can reimagine that. And so I'm wondering, do you think that this present moment that we're in is particularly special for like making that type of change? And you know, what does a movement look like today, that type of um, movement against militarization and policing?
Yeah, so I would say first and foremost, the moment that we're in, and this is something the campaign really taught me, especially working with Kairos, because that's the term that I'm going to use here is Kairos. It's a moment of like great uncertainty, sudden change, a lot of power, a lot of momentum. And it's a ancient Greek word, and so if you consider, you know, what we know and what we're taught as we're brought up through education systems, Western education systems, about Greek just mythology and history and culture. Think about like Zeus and just this extreme uncertainty and change. So that's the moment that I believe we're in right now. And what the campaign has taught me is and a lot of my research and my own personal experiences, I'm seeing that the last time we were in a global moment like this was during the time of Martin Luther King and the original Poor People's Campaign. And excuse me. And so like this moment is a very special moment, and you know, you have to seize that moment. You have to choose a side in a Kairos moment. That's what a lot of my research shows is you have to pick a side. So you're either going to pick the side of the people or the powerful, and hopefully you pick the side to give power to the people. And so that's kind of where I think it's going. And one of the reasons that I have personally committed so much time and effort to growing along with the Poor People's Campaign National Call for More Revival is because this fusion organizing idea is what I believe we need in this Kairos moment that we're experiencing right now, right here. And so I was wrapping up my undergraduate degree during the 2016 presidential campaign. And I remember kind of I was writing for my campus newspaper, Old Dominion University, and I remember kind of coming up with this idea in my mind that I think what we're seeing is the end of this systemic heteronormative white supremacy. And the reason it's getting so bad and so ugly is if we look to kind of astrophysics and the life cycle of a star, we see that, and believing in science, believe that we all originate from stars, and stars kind of dictate our own life cycles. But and so everything's kind of repeatable in nature, and so therefore a star gives off the most amount of energy and is the most violent right before its death. So therefore, I think in this Kairos moment, we are seeing this explosion of the systemic heteronormative white patriarchal supremacy, and it's dying. However, that being said, we can't take the route of kind of what I learned in right-wing evangelicism, which is, oh well, god'll take care of it. No, we have to be, in liberation theology, we have to be actively engaged in our agency, and our agency includes the agency of everybody else who is not as empowered as we are, up to the same amount of empowerment. And then when they're all empowered, we work on freeing everybody else. So therefore it's moving towards this mass model, this international solidarity, recognizing that somebody in on downtown Baltimore is the same as someone in Covington, West Virginia, as someone out in the middle of Colorado Springs, Colorado, that has to face very, very similar situations. However, it's totally different experiences based upon what you're born into. So therefore we need to bring together, and that's where I think the fusion organizing model that Poor People's Campaign follows really, really plays into this, is the fact that we recognize, okay, it's not just a one person, one class, one culture type issue. It's systemic, it's across the board. So we need to all come together and lift each other up.
Yeah, exactly. And I never have thought about it. Like, I loved your kind of analogy about like the life cycle of a star and like us being connected to that, because that's so very important. And it also like brings up questions around what is our relationship to like the greater space, and like how are we like giving space for that within this like organizing even world. And so thank you for making space for that and like naming that. That's huge. And also um very relevant, talking about the original Poor People's Campaign, and that kind of um brings me to my next question, which links like 50 years ago, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King called militarism one of the triple evils alongside poverty and racism. And so today, with our current Poor People's Campaign, we're linking militarism with poverty, racism, ecological devastation, all of these things that we have talked about before. And so, yeah, I'm just like wondering, what do you think like it will take to build the political will to do this type of moving today, like, and what's keeping us from doing that movement building around these issues, or political action around these issues?
Going back to what King said, and kind of what's motivated me to go down the path that I'm going down, is looking for this radical revolution of value. And then he follows that up by saying shifting from a thing oriented society, i.e., capitalist society, to a people oriented society. Or if you study James Cone, Gustavo Gutierrez, you kind of start realizing that a people-oriented society or a more humane society is a more social society, a socialist society. So it's making that shift, as Dr. King stated. And something I also wanted to point out, I don't know if you asked this question and I just kind of forgot to touch on it, or if it just hasn't come up yet, but drawing back to the original Poor People's Campaign, and I kind of wanted to say something about the involvement of veterans in social justice movements. Going all the way back, and again, I like to take it back to the foundations of this country, the United States. So the first social justice movements we start seeing are coming out of the Revolutionary War, Civil War, where you had integrated companies or troops, not necessarily companies integrated, but black troops fighting alongside of white troops, or indigenous and native folks fighting right alongside the colonizers, depending on what wars we're talking about. And so you had, like, when they come out of these wars, a lot of times you would have people arguing, well, if we held guns together and were, volunteering to die together, then why can't we, live together, whatever. And so moving into, post World War One, you had the Bonus March, which kind of set the stage for how social justice movements would march on Washington following World War One, with veterans requesting their promised bonuses, and then getting into Martin Luther King's era. You had Vincent Harding, who was, his co-author on the Beyond Vietnam speech and one of his most trusted advisors. He was an Army veteran, as well as Ralph Abernathy. He was a World War II veteran, so who took over Poor People's Campaign once Dr. King was assassinated. So therefore, the role of veterans in movements, and then, moving out of all that, you move into Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and then coming up into Veterans for Peace in the 80s, Iraq Veterans Against the War in the mid 2000s, and then evolving into About Face Veterans Against the War. And now there's a group that we've been working with through Veterans for Peace, Left Flank Vets, who have been doing some organizing as well. So there's all of these different vets organizing groups, and vets have this certain relationship with the federal government because of where we've been. And at the same time, like, for me personally, like, my experiences lead me down this path to, for example, I deployed to South America, and we called it a diplomatic deployment. But then as I got involved in the Veterans Peace movement, I realized, no, we're just going down there to show them what will happen if they don't take our loans and stay with the International Monetary Fund and World Bank and follow the policies and the puppet presidents and such that the United States government wants in order there. So it's moving into all of these spaces, and then taking this movement and pushing it forward with those experiences that we gain, and again, in the military, we kind of see an international lens. So therefore, that's kind of where I've started picking up a lot more of this international solidarity. So what else did you want in that question?
I think you hit it all. But I'm just like, maybe just like wondering, yeah, what do you think is keeping us from doing some of this like political action? Maybe more concretely.
Um, I think it's a fear of the unknown. Clearly, post enlightenment, I mean, coming out of the dark ages and feudal society, like, we've never stepped into this more humane territory. With the French Revolution, we see this idea of enlightenment, where humans can start considering emotions, considering our relationship with the natural, with the unknown, with the spiritual, with the mental, with the physical. Before the Enlightenment, we didn't have these types of thoughts. However, that's the last major shift in society and culture, because we were getting into industrialism there, and what's that, like the 1700s. I'm not great with the dates there, but somewhere 1700s or 17th century, something like that, is around when all that stuff went down. But yeah, we haven't had a major shift in the way we think, the way we do things since then. And what we're seeing is the most vocal, the most active push of this change is the far right extreme push, which is recognized in digital spaces as what they call the dark enlightenment, which has led to what we refer to a lot as the alt right, or now I guess MAGA is another common term for this movement. The Donald Trump supporters, Make America Great Again, is what that acronym stands for. And so like we're seeing and hearing a lot from that side of the spectrum, and that's a very, very, very minute fraction of a population that's a fraction of the population. Like, so they're not even their overall population on the right is not the majority. And so, first and foremost, like I said earlier, we have to take a side, we have to take a stand in order for this moment to be seized and for it to go to a more humane and a more social, a more just society. Secondly, I believe that people just need to stop being scared, stop arguing about, like where what is more just, what is more humane, who's being oppressed and marginalized more. That creates kind of this veil, these blinders that I've talked about. So we need to recognize that when somebody says, hey, we as a community are experiencing this systemic racism, militarism, unjust treatment, we as a society need to recognize that we don't need to argue over that. We need to stop and ask the critical questions and ask, what is the power dynamic? Who is being impacted here? How are they being impacted? And start really, really turning things over and rejecting the status quo and seeing how we can make things better, not arguing that, hey, well, if you would have saved for a rainy day. It's interesting because the business owners that were telling people to save for a rainy day 10 years ago, in the stock market crash of '08, are now saying, hey, we can't stay open because we can't afford to pay people a living wage. So apparently this pick yourself up by the bootstraps Protestantism is not working out. So what do we need to do? Thirdly and final, we need to recognize that on the global left right political paradigm linear spectrum, and I do not believe in linear politics at all. However, that's kind of the mainstream view. But on this political spectrum, we need to recognize that even people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are actually slightly right of center when you compare them to people globally. So therefore, while yes, they are the type of they are typically pushing for the types of policies that will lead to a more just and humane society, we need to recognize that they aren't the scary boogie people on the left. They are actually just slightly right of center, and we need to actually go further left than where they are in order to seize this moment and create a more just society and remove these three isms that Martin Luther King identified.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I think a lot of the things that we consider like radical, just like very like revolutionary concepts are like fairly moderate to, you know, a good portion of the rest of the world. And so I guess that leads me to probably my last question then, for you, TJ, is like, what should we like ask this new administration? Like, what should we be like fighting for right now?
Um, First and foremost, a complete overhaul of the military, the Pentagon, defense spending, contractor spending. Like, there needs to be an immediate, almost like, civilian oversight panel of, economic experts, people with backgrounds that came out of the military possibly, but just have a lot of people come together and look, because there is a lot of waste and abusive type spending in this military sector. And then you start linking the contracts back and you start seeing that, okay, well, this company that makes tear gas for the military to use on poor people over in Iraq and Afghanistan for crowd control also sells this to the Israeli army, who uses it against Palestinians who don't have places to live, to call their own homeland. These tear gas canisters are also used in places like Baltimore, Ferguson, California. We see the same stamp. So it's we need to really see where all of these different contracts are linked, and how this violence that we commit globally comes back into each and every one of our own neighborhoods. Like it's crazy for me. I live in one of the most militarized areas in the United States. It's home to the largest naval installation in the world. But it's crazy for me to go around saying where I live that we need to completely re look at how we evaluate the military. But I think if we start thinking about things in this fashion, then we start realizing that it's not right to make a living killing somebody, or volunteering to kill somebody, to go to war thousands of miles away and shoot at somebody who you might not ever look in the eyes, and you might not ever know what they've experienced in life. So it's recognizing that these things, like, are all interconnected, and this violence, and what it is it's this thing oriented society. We are not focused on people, and I believe that if we can really push this idea of a moral budget, of these 14 moral action principles to follow, of politicians committing to morally sound and morally just policies and legislation. Going to the recent runoff elections in Georgia, Raphael Warnock, he was the minister at the same church where Reverend King was at. So it's although I don't believe that this political system is the proper and just political system, doing damage control in the current state where we are, where we put people like Reverend Warnock in office, where we have people like Reverend Barber and Reverend Liz fighting for people's rights on Capitol Hill, and not just them fighting for people's rights, but using their platforms to bring us before Congress and testify. It's telling these stories and using sound policy analysis to back up these anecdotal stories, and involving people who are recognizable and people who are understandable in relating these stories to policy, I think. And I believe that Poor People's Campaign is on that path to doing it the right way.
Thank you so much, TJ. Man, you are brilliant. I've been over here just snapping and clapping because you are so correct. And I think your analysis is so very astute. And yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Do you have any other points that you want to make before closing out?
No, I think we're good. I think I said what I felt I needed to say.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.